Hello. Welcome back here to Wine with Jimmy. I'm your host, Jimmy Smith. Thank you so much for signing up, and I hope you're finding them very useful, all of these videos, for your studies. Welcome to, of course, the Diploma Level 4 Northeast Italy, and we are here on Series 4 on the Veneto Introduction. We are here on part 2 of 2, looking at the growing environment and the geology. Now, Veneto is an important area. It's Italy's most productive wine region. It accounts for about 25% of Italy's DOC or G production. Now, Piemonte and Toscana have a larger number of DOC, DOCGs, but Veneto is the largest producer in terms of volume of the DOC, DOCGs that it holds. 40% of what Veneto makes falls in DOC, DOCG. IGT would be about 40%. It's the third largest area under vine. That's behind Sicily and Puglia, with around 80,000 hectares. So it's pretty significant. So what about its growing environment? Now, you know where it lies. We talked about that in the last video. We're kind of in the northern part, sort of towards the most central of the northeastern section. And we are looking here at a warm to moderate continental climate with a moderate rainfall, which can vary depending if you are towards the Adriatic or towards the Alps, of course. Now, we do have parts of Veneto which are completely alpine, bordering Austria, but that's not where we find viticulture. But then as we move down towards the Adriatic, we will then find the mountains give way to foothills. And this is where we can find vineyards. So we therefore will find some altitude. And we have cooling influences that may come from this altitude, exposing vineyards in those foothills to a large diurnal temperature swing. So yes, we have some altitude. And we certainly will talk about this when we look at northern parts of Valpolicella, the Classico area of Soave, for example. We're not talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meters, but we're talking, 300 up to sort of 300, 400 meters. Now, Lake Garda sits at the far western part of Veneto, and it's an important boundary as a geographical feature, because you may experience cooling influences from the breezes from Lake Garda, certainly in the vineyards to the far west of the region, such as Bardolino, for example. And that's what you see here. So you'll actually find La Rocca up here, very famously at Lake Garda. You'll see in the background of that picture, Italy's largest lake. What about the flat plains? So if we keep heading towards the south, so we've already talked about the northern areas, the Alpine to foothills. We've talked about the west with Lake Garda. If you keep going south of Verona, you cross the Adige, and eventually you'll get to the Po River. So you have this big river basin. And the flat plains of both the Adige, which does not empty into the Po, it goes all the way across with the Po, but empties into the Adriatic. You will find that there are a lot of flat plains down here, and you'll get moist air and fogs developing from the Adige and Po rivers. And therefore, we have a problem with things like mildew and rot. So there's an increased amount of spraying that will happen in commercial viticulture in these areas. There's also an increase in trunk disease, such as Esca here as well. Now, if you are sitting here going, what is Esca? Or, I don't know the different types of mildew. You need to, of course, then jump to my other part of the e-learning portal, looking at viticulture, and look at the videos that focus on things like mildew and Esca to get a real good understanding of the topic. So the geology of the flat plains, just continuing, because we're talking about the commercial side of the production around the Adige and the Po, problems with it as well. Generally, though, of course, because we are looking at a large, extensive river basin around both the Adige and the Po, we're going to find more fertility in the soils, and this means increased vigor across the production of vines in these areas. So we're going to have larger potential productions here. And of course, this is where we find lots of voluminous Venetian IGT production. But then there's hillsides, the beautiful picture of the Castello di Soave here. So Soave's old walled town, you can see in the left of this picture, and then we are in the hillsides of the Classico just here. Hillside sites are better suited to quality production, as we know, due to a combination of better drainage, but also, of course, the lower nutrient availability, which means the vines need to create bigger root systems and tend to produce much better quality as a result. The example here is the example in this picture, the Classico hillsides of Soave, where we find volcanic soils, well-draining volcanic clays and limestones. Quite an unusual mix of geology here, actually, but remarkably important. And I will talk about that in the Soave section later on in another series. The DOCs of both Valpolicella and Soave, which are the two need-to-knows really for your diploma, will extend from the hills, like we see here, down to the plains. Now, this extension, in combination with the high yields that are allowed, means that the quality you can get here can be often around acceptable at the real lower end to outstanding. There's a real big range of styles that can be found in places like Soave and Valpolicella. Now, the system that classically is famous here is Pergola Veronese, which is a big vine, a highly trained vine, as you'll see from this diagram. It's characterized by a sloping or sub-horizontal scaffolding, which is what you see here. Now, this one is in fact horizontal, which is fixed to the supporting pole and composed of wooden elements to which are fixed the wires that support the vines. So then you have this sequence of pergolas from a series of wonderful structures and architectural structures that really dominate the landscape. They're typically around 1.5 to 2 meters high, and usually with contour ploughing arrangement that allows Soave to have that very typical wonderful landscape. Now, we think with a lot of local and recent research, the pergola, in fact, is the most suitable form of vine training for Soave production, for example. Now, I know this is the Venetian introduction, but I'm picking out Soave as an example. It actually allows maximum capability in terms of interception of sunlight. And then also it manages to support the vigor in the ground with the vigor of the vine. So you're able to get relatively good quality, ripened fruit, but at higher yields, which means it's good for everybody involved. You often also can find polyculture, so other types of crops being grown underneath the pergola systems as well. Your last slide before we wrap up this this growing environment and geological section is actually just looking at the grape varieties, of course, which we will focus on the relevant areas. So Garganega, for example, will be focused on in Soave. Corvina will be focused in for the Valpolicella section, for example. Now, this graph shows you the 6 varieties planted and the domination of Glera, which of course is utilized for Prosecco. You've then got things like Merlot and Pinot Grigio. So they're the 3 kind of high cultivated amounts. So Glera, Merlot, Pinot Grigio. But it will be Garganega and Corvina that we focus on in terms of indigenous varieties. Now, typically, the varieties that are made out of Merlot, Pinot Grigio, for example, but also things like Trebbiano, certainly from the plains, mean that you're going to have typically simple and fruity wines. They might often be labeled as Veneto IGP and not necessarily a DOC. But we will go through the DOCs in much greater detail in the forthcoming slides. So that brings me to the end of the Venetian introduction, where we looked at history, we looked at that stuff around the climate and geology. Now, it seems like it's a bit of an overview, because it is. We're going to get into the real nitty gritty, the finite and real specific details in the next series. That's series 5 and 6. As always, any comments, questions or concerns, please do email me. That's info@winewithjimmy.com. Or please use the social media you see at the bottom of every slide. And of course, if you find yourself in the UK, come and see me in London, because that's where I've got many establishments. You can come and see me for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.